We begin tonight with a look across our northern border. The United States and Canada share one of the most successful bilateral trading relationships anywhere in the world. NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, is an important component of that relationship. The two countries sell to each other and collaborate in creating goods to sell around the globe. In doing so, millions of jobs are created. This week, the Honorable François-Philippe Champagne, the Canadian Minister of International Trade, visited Cleveland to further cultivate this long-standing relationship. While here, he delivered the commencement address to the Case Western Reserve University School of Law, met with Mayor Frank Jackson and Loretta Mester, President and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland, the Cleveland Council on World Affairs, and with IdeaStream's host of All Things Considered on 90.3 WCPN, Tony Ganser. Tony began by asking what is the Canadian view of the ongoing talks regarding NAFTA.
What matters, I think, under the circumstances we have is to have a good deal. We know that NAFTA was negotiated, 24 years ago about? E-commerce did not even exist, so the way we transact, the way we buy, the way we sell has changed significantly. So we need a modernized agreement which will reflect how the economy works and also reflect the integrated nature of our supply chain. I think, I was in Ohio this morning, and there's three numbers that came to mind. Number one, 300,000 and 20 billion. So one, saying to people in Ohio that Canada is the first customer of the state of Ohio. Secondly, 300,000 jobs here in Ohio depends on trade with Canada. And 20 billion is the exports of Ohio to Canada. So it just shows how interlinked we are. And by the way, we sell more to Ohio than we sell to Japan. So it just shows the integrated nature of our relationship. And that's why we want to invest in making sure that remains the best relationship we have in the world.
Canada is such an important partner for Ohio's economy, but the country as a whole as well, the United States. Is that at all in danger, specifically with the relationship with Ohio, with some of the things that have been talked about? And should workers be concerned on either side of the border with how things have been going?
Well, the first thing when I got appointed as Minister of International Trade for Canada, the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, asked me to make trade real for people. My job is to convert paper into order book, into jobs, into prosperity. These agreements obviously are needed, but what really matters is how much jobs can we create on both sides. And if you look at the data, for example, 9 million jobs in the United States depends on trade and investment between the US and Canada. The same thing on the Canadian side, about 2 million jobs depend on that. Just look at the perspective, Canada and the US exchange about 2 billion of goods and services every single day. We have 400,000 people crossing the border every day. So commerce has always existed between our two nations because, it just makes sense. We produce things together. That's why I keep saying that our relationship is unique in the world. And every time I've been engaging with US officials, I say, for me, if you put it in a very simple terms for workers, is that how can we make North America more competitive? How can we build more in North America? And how can we sell together to the rest of the world? This is really what we're trying to achieve. Be more competitive, build more, and sell more. And I often say that, the relationship we've established between Canada and the United States is so unique in the world that we need to do everything we can to preserve it. Because at the end, we're doing these agreements because we want to protect the middle class. We want to bring more jobs into North America and making sure that we build prosperity not only for now, but for the decades to come.
Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown, for example, has mentioned the rules of origin, which you mentioned before. I think the Trump administration suggested now 75% of components in a car should be traced to North America, up from 62.5%, for example. And there have been criticisms that this will be difficult for the supply chain all over North America to meet these agreements. Do you think that's a bridge too far? Are we able to come to an agreement on something such as that, which is so vital to Ohio's economy?
But you're right to say that those are very complex. And we have to think, you rightly put it, that we need to think about the supply chain. Because the nature of our relationship is not one of buyer and seller, is one where we make the things together. So when you look at rules of origin, you need to look at the entire supply chain between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. And that's why I think you've heard people from the industry say, hold on for a minute, let's make sure that we get this right, because this is going to impact jobs in every country. I think what we've come to realize, and I think with our US colleagues, is that a decision on one side of the border will have an impact on both sides. Let me give you an example. About 40% of everything that Ohio does is exported to Canada. But 50% of that 40% is intra-company trade. So it's parents selling to affiliates. It's within the same company. So that's why we need to keep that border as thin as possible, because we understand that the flow of goods oftentimes, if you look at the auto sector, I was with the auto part manufacturers, they would tell you that parts would move sometimes 6 to 7 times across the border before they end up in a finished vehicle. So that's what we're dealing with. So we really have to be mindful of that when we're talking about amending rules of origin to make sure that this is a win-win-win situation. Because at the end of the day, that's what people expect from us, but also consumers. If we want to make our trading bloc the most competitive in the world, we have to be mindful of that.
Do you think that that is possible with President Trump, especially talking about America first and wanting the United States to look after itself first and foremost? Do you think it's possible to take a regional trading bloc approach and have a successful, amicable solution when the president is using rhetoric like that?
Well, I would say Canada is part of the solution. We've never been part of the problem. If you look on steel, for example, the United States has a surplus with Canada when it comes to steel. Canada is the largest buyer of U.S. steel. And when it comes to national security, as you know, we protect our borders together. If you look at the bigger picture, just think about that. Canada buys more from the United States than China, Japan, and UK combined. So, we're the biggest customer. We work together. So my point is, it's not, in my view, it's not looking at what's going on amongst each other, is how can together we can become more competitive and build more in North America and sell more from North America to the world. That should be our common goal, because President Trump ran on a platform to help the middle class. We did exactly the same. That's why, like I was saying, Prime Minister Trudeau said, help me make sure that trade works for people. Is how can we create more jobs? How can we build better standards? How can we make sure that our trade agreements are converted into jobs and prosperity? That should be our ultimate goal, because we're united as families, as allies, as partners. So our relationship is so unique in the world that you cannot compare it to any other relationship. This is probably the most successful relationship in the history of the world. We have the longest common border. I was just with the U.S. Coast Guard. We're looking at how can we do in the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence River to do more together. I was with Mayor Jackson saying, how can we do more regionally? I was with the greater Cleveland community, and we're saying, people, investors today, they're looking at regions to invest, and we know that investment follows talent. How can we link that with supercluster in Toronto, for example, in advanced manufacturing? There's so many points of connectivity that my point is, let's take what's best on both sides and let's market that to the world and bring investors in North America.
Has the rhetoric of President Trump damaged this relationship at all? We do have such a rich history between the two countries and between Ohio and Canada. Are we damaging that relationship at all by talking about American first?
Well, I think what you hear, I was with Mayor Jackson. We've been engaging with mayors, with governors, with senators, with congressmen and women and senators in the U.S. Senate. I think you have people, realize now. The danger, Tony, is that we took each other for granted. And I think it's about time that we invest in that relationship. We are lucky that Prime Minister Trudeau and President Trump have developed a very good relationship. I think this is serving us well. I think it's time in the world. The world is fraught with uncertainty and instability, that for friends and allies to work together, to look at how we can remain competitive and address the common issues together. I think that's the future for us, is how can we work best together? And I don't think of any two partners which work better. So we're looking forward to engaging. We've been at the table. You've seen Canada always trying to find constructive solutions. For example, on the steel issue, we added border agents to make sure that there would be no transshipment coming from Canada. We want to protect the border together. We want to be your best partner. We want to continue to work together, because we know that this is the way forward, and that when you share the same continent and you have so many ties, the only future is together.